Good morning, everybody. We will start momentarily. We'll start in 1 minute. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Built Heritage Committee meeting of November 12th, 2024. I'd like to call the members to order. This hybrid meeting is being facilitated through Zoom and is being held on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, the original custodians of the unceded land in which the city of Ottawa is located. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Since this committee meeting is being streamed live on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel, I'd like to remind participants to please keep your microphones muted until I call upon you to speak. For those participating here in the committee room, please use the microphone in front of you and keep your computer muted. I will provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item in the order in which they raise their hand in Zoom. For panelists, the raise hand option is found at the bottom of the participants list. For those calling in, please press *9 to raise your hand. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for these cues. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declarations of interest in writing to the coordinator at their earliest opportunity. Although the deadlines have passed to register to speak at committee and to provide written submissions to this committee, residents can still make written submissions to council. If you have technical difficulties signing into the meeting, you can contact the committee coordinator. A reminder that if participants are having technical issues with their Zoom connection, they may call in using the backup telephone number provided by the coordinator. I have received regrets from member Dote. Before we proceed, I'd like to ask the committee coordinator to do a roll call of all members.
Councillor Kelly?
Present.
Member Dote, Member Quinn?
Present.
Councillor Troster?
Here.
Member Madigan?
Here.
Councillor Leeper?
Here.
Member Legault?
Here.
Vice Chair Plount?
Ici.
Chair King?
Here.
We have quorum, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, confirmation of minutes for Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. The minutes noted on this agenda confirmed? Confirmed. Thank you so much. I'll proceed with a consent agenda today. The first item will be responses to inquiries. We have Councillor Menard with us today, who had submitted an inquiry on public notice for heritage-related applications. I believe there is intent to lift this inquiry, so we will come back to that immediately after we continue to proceed with the consent agenda. The first item under planning development building services is an application to alter St. Bridget's Church at 310 St. Patrick Street. We will hold that item for presentation as there are speakers. Item 5.2, Heritage Committee Improvement Plan application for 70 Richmond Road. We will hold that item for a presentation. Item 5.3, designation of 1121 Wellington Street West under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There are technical amendments and a deferral motion. There's only one registered speaker from Heritage Ottawa, so I don't know if we want to dispose with this item immediately.
Yeah, I have a, I'll put it, can I put a deferral motion on the table?
Absolutely.
I'm getting.
Thank you.
So thank you. Through a number of channels, we finally. got
And I
in touch
believe
with the
before
owner.
we just need to move a technical amendment by Vice Chair Plant.
C'est beau, c'est là. Merci beaucoup. Whereas the report of this item titled Designation 1121 Wellington Street West under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act was published on November 6, 2024. After the publication of the agenda on October 31st, 2024, be it resolved that the Built Heritage Committee approve the addition of the report for consideration at today's meeting pursuant to subsection 89(3) of the procedural bylaw. Merci.
Thank you. Is that technical amendment approved? Carried. Thank you. And now to a deferral motion moved by Councillor Leeper.
Thanks. Through a number of different channels, the contact with the owner has become a little more solid. They need a little bit of time to understand the implications of a heritage designation. I'm wholly supportive of this designation, but we want to give the owner every chance to understand what this is. So whereas the property owner has requested additional time to discuss the proposed designation with staff in order to understand the process and potential implications of designation, therefore be it resolved that Built Heritage Committee approve the following: defer the report for further consideration and return to Built Heritage Committee at the first BHC Committee of 2025, and permit staff to include, if necessary, a revised staff report and or supporting documentation for inclusion in the distribution of the meeting agenda with appropriate notice being provided.
Thank you. Is that motion carried?
Carried.
Carried. So
Carried.
the next item is 5.4, designation of 8 Robert Kemp Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The only speaker that is registered is David Jeans. If this item was to be carried, would you need to speak to this item? Okay, thank you so much. Is there any will of the committee to hold this item for questions or comments? Seeing none, is the report carried?
Carried.
Thank you so much. This report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council on November 27th for its consideration. Item 5.5, designation of 152 Metcalfe Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We will hold that item as there is a presentation of speakers. Item 5.6, designation of 66 Queen Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We do have registered speakers from the Community Association, Centertown Community Association, as well as David Jeans. I'd also like to ask whether delegation is necessary if the committee moves forward to approve this item. I would like to speak. Okay, so we will hold that item. Item 5.7, designation of 249 Bronson Avenue under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Once again, the only registered speaker is David Jeans. We did receive correspondence from Heritage Ottawa, so just wanted to repeat that same question. Okay, so is there any will of the committee to hold this item for questions or comments? Seeing none, is the report carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you so much. This report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council on November 27th for its consideration. And item 6.1, we might as well dispose of that now, is the status update, Building Heritage Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending October 25th, 2024. There's no presentation, no registered speakers. Can this item be carried?
Carried.
Thank you so much. So we can go back to the top of the agenda, responses to inquiries. And there is a motion to lift the inquiry. I'll ask Vice Chair Plant to introduce that motion.
Be it resolved that the Built Heritage Committee allow discussion of this item for consideration by the committee at today's meeting pursuant to subsection 89(4) of the procedure bylaw. Merci.
Thank you so much. Is this motion carried? Carried. Thank you. And there is a motion of response moved by Vice Chair Plant.
You want to read it? Okay. Whereas an inquiry regarding public notice for application under the Ontario Heritage Act was submitted to Built Heritage Committee on October 8th, 2024, and whereas through the response of this inquiry, staff have identified several mechanisms to increase awareness in the community of a heritage permit application subject to City Council approval. Therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to implement the approaches identified in the inquiry response, including 1, increasing the circulation radius of council level heritage permit applications from 30 meters to 60 meters beginning in 2025. Develop a procedure for posting a temporary notification signs on properties subject to council level heritage permit application beginning in 2025. Therefore, be it further resolved that staff be directed to recover all the cost of these additional notification measures through a $200 increase to all council level Ontario Heritage Act application fees to be implemented through 2025 operating budget effective January 1st, 2025. And be it further resolved that in order to further increase transparency and awareness of heritage applications, staff be directed to explore the development of an electronic mailing list that residents in Heritage Conservation District can sign up for in the city's website and be notified of upcoming council level permit applications under the OHA. Merci.
Thank you so much. Comments by committee and council members. Councilor Menard.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to thank the Vice Chair for reading that in. And I also want to thank staff for their collaboration and quick work on the issue and the motion, in particular, Leslie Collins. The proposal does a good job of finding some initial solutions to some concerns that were raised, while also looking into additional ways to improve notification of our residents' understanding of the heritage process, which is always a good thing with a minimal charge to applicants to keep the proposal cost neutral for the city. So this would really harmonize a similar process for planning applications. Now you would see a sign on the property, as we do with larger planning applications. And it gives residents an opportunity to sign up in heritage conservation districts to know which applications will be coming. So just a great and I think simple but effective proposal. And so I just wanted to really thank staff for their work on this and in the response to that inquiry and for committee's consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilor Menard, for moving this motion forward. I concur based on scenarios that I have seen in my ward with heritage conservation districts and just the general interest by residents for greater transparency in our planning and land use and heritage processes to have more information, really to know what's occurring and being able to participate in that process. I think we've heard some files before us, just today, where we are extending sometimes the consultation with residents and others. So there's clarity and transparency and full participation in the process. I think that this motion really works towards achieving that. So it has my support and hopefully the support of others around this table. Is this item approved?
Approved.
Thank you so much. Now we move on to our substantive items that have been held. 5.1, application to alter the former St. Bridget's Church at 310 St. Patrick Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We will begin with a presentation. Sorry. There is a technical amendment on this item. So before we go ahead with the presentation, I'll ask Vice Chair Plant to introduce that technical amendment.
Thank you. Whereas document 4 of the report titled Application to Alter the Former St. Bridget's Church at 310 St. Patrick Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, was not available for publication on the agenda on October 31st and was published with the agenda on the following day. Therefore, be it resolved that the Built Heritage Committee approve addition document 4, adaptive reuse proposal to the report. Merci.
Thank you for placing that on the floor. And now we can proceed with our presentation.
Good morning, everyone. So I just put a few slides together for this application. This is for the former St. Bridget's Church at 310 St. Patrick Street. Let me go to the next slide. Property is located in Lower Town, within the Lower Town West Heritage Conservation District, but the building itself is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act and includes both interior and exterior attributes. The application today before you is to remove the pews in the nave. To go to the next slide. So here's a few shots of the pews as they are today. So this building is no longer used as a church and it's meant to be used as an event space. One of the big challenges of adaptive reuse of this building is the limitations that the pews pose. So the application is for the removal. A few pews will remain up in the organ loft. Some of these pews that are to be removed here will go downstairs to the basement, and the rest of them will be disposed of through various means, including donations to other churches, museums, or other members of the public. So the applicant has created a salvage plan to itemize those items there. When the pews are removed, the new flooring will be installed to make it level and accessible for the public. Next slide. And staff are recommending to approve this alteration to the building. And also we've included one more recommendation regarding updates to the Ontario Heritage Act when the removal of an attributes are done under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff are to come back to committee and council with a recommendation on whether the statement of cultural heritage value should be updated or not. So once the removal is complete, we'll come back with a recommendation on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. In regards to the technical amendment that was moved by Vice Chair Plant, is that approved? Is that carried?
Carried.
Thank you so much. We did receive correspondence from multiple parties, including Heritage Ottawa, and we do have a number of registered speakers on this item, starting with Craig Ham. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and you have 5 minutes before the committee.
Good morning. Thank you to the committee for the opportunity to speak regarding the adaptive reuse proposal submitted by St. Bridget's Center for the Arts and Barry Podolsky Associates Incorporated Heritage Consultants. My name is Craig Ham. I am a longtime resident of Ottawa and founding member of Irish Communities of Ottawa and its current chairperson. I am also the vice chair and past chair of Ottawa Irish Arts, an organization dedicated to historical preservation. Irish Communities of Ottawa was founded in February 2020 to facilitate and encourage cooperation and friendship among the many Irish organizations in Ottawa. Our membership currently stands at 17 volunteer-run community groups covering a broad range of activities. Today, I am proud to speak on behalf of the following lengthy list of organizations: the British Isles Family History Society of Greater Ottawa, Irish Film Festival Ottawa, Irish Radio Canada, James Joyce Association of Ottawa, the Ottawa Celtic Choir, the Ottawa Gaels, Aero Hurling Club, Ottawa Irish Rugby, Ottawa Irish Arts, Global Irish Famine Way, Ottawa Committee, Ireland Canada Chamber of Commerce Ottawa, Irish Seniors Social Group Ottawa, Irish Society of the National Capital Region, we're almost there, University of Ottawa Celtic Studies, Carleton University Celtic Instrument Studies, Irish Women's Network of Ontario, and finally, St. Bridget's Center for the Arts. St. Bridget's Church, now St. Bridget's Center for the Arts, is named for the patroness saint of Ireland and is a key part of the Irish built heritage story in Ottawa. As described in detail in the proposal, the alteration is limited to the removal of permanently affixed pews. Irish Communities of Ottawa strongly supports this application to alter as described in the proposal. Presently, the pews in St. Bridget's, being great in number and permanently affixed to the floor, greatly restrict the usage of the space to either small events utilizing the demountable stage or, in more rare cases, larger events where the pews are used, though inflexible and unsuitable for use in modern events lasting several hours. The pews makes the present space non-viable for consideration for use by our member organizations. Our member organizations that use the limited capacity available at St. Bridget's Center for the Arts would confirm that this large space is completely underutilized. It is underfed by sufficient revenue to effectively preserve the remaining unaltered architecture. one can already see the peeling paint and further ravages of time in the environment. As it is underutilized, the long-term preservation of this Ottawa architectural landmark is in greater jeopardy of being lost. This is of specific concern to the Canadians of Irish heritage in Ottawa, our member organizations, and should be a general concern to Ottawa citizenry who wish to preserve Ottawa's heritage. The Ottawa Irish community wish to see this important cultural and architectural landmark preserved for education, enjoyment, and business use, where these activities increase the viability of the building's long-term future, therefore, the preservation of this property. Should the proposal be approved, the member organizations of Irish communities of Ottawa will benefit greatly. The vitality of the Irish Canadian community and the long-term viability of St. Bridget's are connected. The venue gives a place for our community to meet, to celebrate, to mourn, and remember, and to grow. These activities in a renewed space increase the sense of bonding with the building that helps ensure its long-term preservation. Naturally, I have concentrated on our Irish community, but a broad diversity of non-Irish groups that already use St. Bridget's Centre for the Arts will also benefit from the addition of a new flexible multi-purpose event space. Finally, in consideration of the residential community surrounding St. Bridget's, a revitalized space will increase the presence of savory activity in a part of downtown Ottawa that has sadly become the focus of newsworthy and unsavory activities. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much for your delegation and also for your advocacy. It's much appreciated. I see that you have a question or series of questions potentially from Vice Chair Plante.
Hi, thank you so much for your advocacy. My son is half Irish, so
Oh, good.
while I consider myself Irish adjacent. So I was just wondering, what would, in your ideal word, you sort of mentioned a bit at the end, some of the challenges with the space, what would you love to see happen at St. Bridget's? What does a revitalized sort of St. Bridget's with the pews gone look like to you and your organizations that you represent?
I could see like, for example, the British Isles Family History Society could have a conference there, or, you know, we have large sport teams, the Ottawa Gales, Aero Curling. They also are unofficially well integrated with the Irish immigrant community in Ottawa, people who are coming to Canada now. And so St. Bridget's has become a center for this gathering and for making these relationships. So I think if you had a wide open space in the nave, they could plan activities to bring everybody together. It could be, you know, a dance. It could be anything like that. It could be a connection conference. You know, people could have their wedding receptions there. You could have business trade shows there on the floor with people's panels, you know, on display, all kinds of things. You could have dance competitions, you know. So I just think it's a great building, and with the pews as they are, there's just no flexibility.
So as you know, St. Bridget's needs a lot of love, which we want to pour all the love we can on St. Bridget's. My office hosts a drag bingo in the bottom portion every single year to raise money. So if it's okay, I'd like to take your contact information, because we just want to raise them a lot of funds and give them the support that they need so they can thrive. It's a cultural institution. It's a landmark in Ottawa, and we have to treat it that
Absolutely.
way. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for the questions, Vice Chair. Are there any other questions for Mr. Ham? Seeing none, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
delegation this morning. Our next registered speaker is Barry Podolsky.
Thank you, Gary King. Just wanted to say that the owners who are here as a delegation support the staff recommendation, and also appreciate the interventions that you've just heard, and also the support from the Lower Town Community Association, Heritage Ottawa, and others. And we're simply here to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you so much for being here, and you do have questions from Member Legault.
Hi. I think it's great that that you're going ahead with this and ensuring the continued use of this church. I just have a question about once the pews are removed, what the intended floor finish will be of the repaired floor, or exactly what will that look like? What will be the finished material?
It's very simple. The church currently has hardwood floor under the pews and a hardwood floor in the aisles, but they are on different levels. There's about 50 millimeters difference between the 2 inches in imperial terms. And so what we will be doing is infilling the floors to create a universally accessible flat surface, all in hardwood.
All in hardwood. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you also have a question or questions from Member Madigan.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll just admit my bias to given my Irish ancestry to seeing the preservation of this church. Barry, I appreciate the report that was included for this proposition, and there's aspect of a heritage recording. Was the heritage recording something that was asked for by the client, or did you propose that?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question all that well because
for the
being
report, there's heritage recording in the report. Was that something you proposed, or is that something the client asked for?
the recording of the existing building was done about 17 years ago by Algonquin College students that came in and measured up the whole space, if that's your question. And was that your question? I'm sorry.
Yes, it was. It's
Okay.
part of sort of like a observation on different proposals that have come before the committee, where sometimes buildings have been well documented to before doing a change, and sometimes they are not. I think for St. Bridget's, there's been good documentation and analysis to show what's being done, to indicate what the changes are, and to document that for understanding the proposition, but also going forward in time as a heritage record. And I think it's a good example that people can reference in the future as an effort to document our heritage that will be changed permanently. So thank you for that.
Yes, the actual activities of removing the pews will be well recorded and documented. I'm passionate about documenting.
It's good to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions, Vice Chair Plant.
Yes, hi. So when I first got elected, we had Altitude Gym come do a tour of St. Bridget's, because as you know, they've bought a lot of high ceiling gyms around the National Capital Region in Gatineau and in Ottawa to build climbing gyms, because apparently churches are very well used for that. And also recently we had the Ottawa Skateboard Association come to see if they could have some adaptive reuse of the space as well. Since you're someone who travels a lot and you've seen a lot of these historic churches, I was wondering if you could maybe give us some ideas that you've seen about how churches have been repurposed for not just for the items that were mentioned before, but some creative ideas that you've seen.
Well, yes, I mean, going back in history, Hagia Sophia in Istanbul was repurposed from a Christian church to a mosque. So there's many things that you can learn internationally from witnessing adaptive reuse. I think that the list of things that was mentioned by the previous delegation are very much the kinds of things that there's a demand for in the capital. And I think the initial approach, rather than settling on any specific adaptive use like a climbing gym or anything like that, is to make it flexible so that all the needs for meeting in a wonderful space like this by various NGOs, government organizations, private sector can actually line up and applied and make use of the space. So flexibility for the first couple of years anyway is the approach that is being taken.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those questions. I don't see anybody else with raised hands, so it's always good to see you, my friend, and former colleague at the subcommittee before this became a full committee. But we appreciate the inputs that you have provided on this file and on many others in terms of heritage throughout the city.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next registered speaker is Linda Holt. Thank you so
Morning.
much.
Nice to see you all. I am not going to repeat what's in our written submission, but I just would like to add that Heritage Ottawa has held several events at St. Bridget's, notably most recently in the Kildare Room, because the nave was not suitable. And we did hold an annual general meeting in the nave shortly after the designation, I believe. It's quite a long time ago. And we look forward to holding other events once this space has been made more accessible and more flexible. Thank you.
We appreciate those comments and for the commitment to the space to ensure its continued use. I don't see any questions for you, so thank you so much for that brief but impactful submission. Are there any questions to staff on this item? Councillor Troster.
I'm just curious as to why these folks need to come to committee to ask to remove church pews. Is that because the entire interior is designated? Yes, when the interior was included in the designation, almost all the interior aspects, so the pews, the walls, all the carvings were all included. So it's very limiting for adaptive reuse.
Yeah, and that's also unusual.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've been to many, many events in that space, and I think it's really exciting that these folks want to continue to adapt it and to reuse it. So I'm fully supportive. But yeah, that's really interesting because we very rarely have a request like this come to this committee for something in the interior, and it seems so basic to me. But I guess they're very special pews. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Troster. Councillor Leeper.
Speaking of which, it's none of our business, obviously, but what is the salvage plan for the pews?
Barry might be best to speak to that, but in his report, he mentioned donating some to their congregations, to I think the public, as well as some museums. I think there may have been some interest from specific sites for them.
Probably a fundraising opportunity as well.
I'm not sure, but potentially.
Okay. I'd be interested. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands raised. So is this report carried?
Carries.
Carried. Thank you so much. So this report will be submitted to council on November 27th for its consideration. The next item is 5.2 Heritage Community Improvement Plan application for 70 Richmond Road. We will have a presentation from staff.
All right, so this is for a Heritage Community Improvement Plan. This will be the first application of the sort that this committee has seen. Go to the next slide. I'll go over some background about what the program is and does. Okay, so the Heritage Community Improvement Plan was adopted by Council in January 2020 and was just recently updated in 2024 with new guidelines. The goal of the program is to encourage property owners to adaptively reuse their buildings and add more housing units. The guidelines were updated just recently to include the requirement for additional housing. The program uses tax increment-based grants paid through the anticipated increase in the municipal portion of the property taxes to the redevelopment. Owners may receive grants equal up to 75% of the increase in taxes paid over a 10-year period to a maximum of $500,000. The final amount paid will be based on the actual revised assessment and then current taxation rates following the completion of the project and the reassessment by MPACT, which is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. Next slide. This application is for 70 Richmond Road, the former Champlain Oil Company service station, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. This application is before committee today for information and was recommended for approval by the Finance and Corporate Services Committee last week. Some members may remember the Associated Heritage application when it originally came before the Built Heritage Subcommittee back in 2022. A heritage permit was issued for the work in June of that year. The project includes the rehabilitation of the Heritage Building and its integration into a 9-story mixed-use building containing 103 residential units with ground floor retail and 2-level underground parking garage. The proposed development includes the relocation of the Heritage Building off-site while construction is ongoing, and these costs are included in the application. Where heritage buildings are required to be temporarily moved from a site to accommodate redevelopment, the best practice in heritage conservation is to move the building in one piece rather than dismantle and reassemble or build a replica, as it retains the architectural integrity of the heritage resource, minimizes risk of damage or loss of the heritage building or materials, and allows for the adaptive reuse of the entire building rather than just the facade. Heritage staff are satisfied that this method was most appropriate for the project and meets the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. Next slide. The restoration components of the project include repairs to the stucco, the twin chimneys and buttresses. Additionally, the standing seam metal roof, membrane, and hoods will be replaced in kind as required and reinforced. The windows and doors will also be removed, rehabilitated, and reinstated. Next slide. The property qualifies as an eligible Heritage CIP project as it is designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, includes the restoration as well as the addition of new housing units. Due to the redevelopment efforts, the municipal portion of the property taxes is expected to increase from approximately $39,000 to approximately $312,000, an increase of $273,000 annually. Looking at the chart on the screen, the blue bar on the left represents the current tax amount. The red bars represent the post-development estimated municipal taxes, and the purple represents the grant amount. This is 75% of the tax increase. The Heritage CIP will be based on 75% of the increase in the municipal portion of the property taxes and is estimated to reach the cap of $500,000 within the 3rd year of the program. Note that this represents an approximate order of magnitude and is based on estimated future assessed values and taxation rates. The final amount of the CIP will be based on the actual revised assessment and then current taxation rates following the completion of the project, the payment of their taxes, and reassessment by impact. And finally, the total restoration costs are estimated to be $1.8 million. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We did receive correspondence on this item from Heritage Ottawa, and Heritage Ottawa is also registered to speak. Excellent. Are there any questions to staff on this item?
Just briefly, I am wondering why this is, I don't understand the process as to why this is here when FinCo has already dealt with it.
That came down to a timing in terms of the committee dates. Initially, we're going to have this prior to the Finance Committee, and then some rejigging of committee dates that happened and flipped around. And also, this is for information only to this committee.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Member Madigan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. When I was going through the material, I thought I read that it was intended to retain the roofing and not replace it in kind. Is it just two different sort of directions on the roof in documentation?
I would have to double check that. I believe it was a replacement, but I can report back after.
Yeah, is the way I recall reading the documentation, it said retain, but from practical experience on a number of projects, roofing material usually considered a replaceable in kind, as sort of it will weather out and cannot be replaced. So personally, I would not have an issue with replacing in kind because that is part of the character defining element of the building, being the red metal roof. And I just recall when I was doing my master's, the loss of garages of this sort of type or as part of our architectural history was something that was identified as something that was coming along. I was just double checking sort of my notes and things. I think something that was not raised in the historical documentation is that the company that owned this station was founded with, I guess, a company that was owned by the grandfather of Pierre Elliott, the current Prime Minister and father of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau. So I don't know if that's something that should be noted as part of the historical significance of the building, which just brings to light lots of history and interconnections between Ontario, Canada, and the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions and comments. Is the report received? Received. Thank you. So this report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council tomorrow on November 13th for consideration. Our next item is 5.5, designation of 152 Metcalfe Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We will have a presentation from staff. And we're just shifting to the correct presentation. Excellent. And now I think we can proceed.
Good morning, Chair King, Vice Chair Plant, and Built Heritage Committee members. Today I'm presenting on Heritage staff's recommendation to designate 152 Metcalfe Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. The subject property is a red brick church constructed in 1880, located in Centertown on the northwest corner of Metcalfe and Gloucester Streets with frontage on both streets. Originally constructed as the Metropolitan Methodist Episcopal Church, it became the St. George's Anglican Church in 1885. The church underwent significant modifications to adapt the space for Anglican worship, including an 1891 addition for a chancel and interior alterations, the addition of a parish hall in 1906, and the 1911 entrance alteration. The building functioned as St. George's Anglican Church until 2011, when it became the St. Peter and St. Paul's Anglican Church, which is currently known as today. Next slide, please. The church is a representative example of Gothic Revival architecture in a religious building in Ottawa, featuring characteristic elements of the style, including pointed arched openings, pier buttresses, prominent towers, and steep gables. At the time of construction, it was the only church in the city constructed of red brick and originally had a tall wooden spire that was destroyed in 1928 when it was struck twice by lightning. The church reflects the work of architects Walter Chesterton, King M. Arnaldi, and Alfred M. Calderon. Chesterton was a prominent local architect during the 19th century and was the original architect commissioned to design the Methodist Church. Arnaldi and Chesterton were commissioned as partners to design the 1891 alterations and additions for St. George's. Both architects were frequently commissioned to design ecclesiastical buildings in Ottawa. The church displays a high degree of craftsmanship and artistic merit through its decorative brickwork, stone carvings, and use of colored, leaded, and stained glass. The church is associated with the growth of Ottawa's early Anglican community in Centertown. The development of Centertown in the 1880s created demand for an Anglican church in the central part of Ottawa. In 1885, it was adopted as St. George's, Centertown's first Anglican church. Next slide, please. The church has significant frontage on Metcalfe Street, a historic street connecting Parliament Hill to the landmark Victoria Memorial Museum, now the Nature Museum, with high-style 19th century mansions and important institutional buildings constructed along the street. It is important in maintaining and defining the character of Centertown and Metcalfe Street as one of Ottawa's earliest core streets and ceremonial routes. The church building is historically linked to its surroundings as it shared a streetscape with other significant 19th and 20th century institutional and civic buildings, including the YMCA, the YWCA, the Carnegie Library, and the Ottawa Masonic Temple. Located prominently at the intersection of Metcalfe and Gloucester Streets, the church is a landmark on Metcalfe Street. Staff have determined that the church at 152 Metcalf Street meets 7 of the 9 criteria for designation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We did receive correspondence from St. Peter's and St. Paul's Anglican Church, as well as Heritage Ottawa. And we do have a number of registered speakers, starting with Reverend Ben Vanderhyde of St. Peter's and St. Paul's Anglican.
Thank you very much for hosting me and for having me join your committee today. As was stated, my name is Pastor Ben Vanderhyde. I'm the lead pastor at St. Peter and St. Paul's Anglican Church, and I'll be speaking on behalf of our parish today. I'd like to acknowledge the City of Ottawa staff, Melanie Blaze and Greg McPherson, who have been very cooperative and responsive to working with us. Our written submission goes into more detail than what I'm going to cover in the next few minutes, but I just want to give a brief summary of our submission. If we could go to slide number 2, that'd be great. Thank you. As a parish, we have been at 152 Metcalf Street for 140 years. Our historic building is vital to our identity as a parish and something that we cherish. Having read the report from the Heritage Committee, we request that the addition constructed to the north of the original church building in 1906, the north wing, as it's described, be excluded from the heritage designation as it does not meet the necessary criteria under the Act. We note that similar exemptions have been granted to buildings in the downtown, including 315 Chapel and 330 Gilmore, where additions or portions of the heritage building were not included in the heritage designation. Next slide, please. For reference, we can see that the north wing labeled on the slide. The report indicates that the attributes of Gothic Revival architecture are an irregular footprint with projecting bays. It is clear that the plain rectangular footprint of the north wing contains none of these attributes. Next slide, please. The report also notes that Gothic Revival also includes features such as hood molds, label stops, secondary cornice, terracotta, and numerous other features and designs. As this photo of the west-facing wall of the north wing shows, none of these features are present. You can also see that the wall has many different shades of bricks due to the extensive masonry repair that has taken place over several years. Next slide, please. This is the view of the east-facing wall on Metcalf Street. This is the only portion of the north wing that's visible from the street, as the large office tower to the right blocks the majority of the wing. Note the lack of ornamental features on the building. We also note that this wall also has an extensive masonry repairs as well. On the 44 pages in the report, there are no references or photos to the heritage or architectural features of the north wing. We also note that the different shades of brick and absence of carved decorative features does not suggest a high degree of craftsmanship. For these reasons, we believe that the north wing does not meet the requirements of criteria 1 and 2. In addition, we note that the report lists the main church building architects as Calderon and Arnoldi, and notes they also designed an addition to the church in 1891. The report does not list any architect for the north wing, nor does it list any builder for it or the main church building. Our own research indicates that Calderon moved to the US in 1902 and Arnoldy died in 1904. Therefore, neither could have designed the north wing. We believe that the report does not demonstrate that the north wing meets the requirement under criteria 2 for talented architects and builders, or under criteria 6, that it is the work of an architect or builder significant to the community. Next slide, please. Several criteria relate to a building being a visible part of the streetscape or neighborhood. And as you can see from this image, the north wing is set back into the very middle of the block. Further, the north half of the north wing is totally encircled by 2 high-rise apartment buildings to the east, north, and west, which encroach up to 1 meter or 2 against the church. The north wing is then further blocked from view by the actual church itself to the east and south, and from the west by the house at 77 Gloucester. Next slide, please. The report shows a number of photos of the Metcalfe streetscape, particularly on pages 41 and 42, none of which show the north wing because it's obscured from view. We include our own photo taken on Gloucester, looking west towards Metcalfe, to further illustrate the point that the north wing is totally obscured from the streetscape. The north wing is behind the office tower on the left of the photo. And then the final slide, please. Similarly, the report does not include any photos along Gloucester looking east, so we included this image from Google Street View to show that the north wing is almost totally obscured from view both by the house at 77 Gloucester and the back of the tower office at 200 Laurier. So in closing, we would like to reiterate that we are only discussing the north wing and not the actual church building. As a parish, we have been at this location for 140 years, and our church building is vitally important to us. But we do not believe that the north wing warrants a heritage designation. So on behalf of the parishioners of St. Peter and St. Paul's, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your delegation. You do have questions starting from Councillor Troster.
Hi, Reverend. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Ariel Troster. I'm the City Councillor for Somerset Ward, where your church is located. I was just wondering, do you have anything specific that you want to do with the north wing if it is not designated? Like, do you have development plans or ideas for it?
Not at this time. We are a parish that is our budget is about 800,000 a year. We have a lot of families that are part of our parish who come from across the city, a lot of lower income families. So we're not in a point right now where we're thinking about development. We do actually own 77 Gloucester, but that's a completely different story. And we have been thinking and kind of dreaming about what we might do with that space in the future, but not with the north wing at this time. Thank you for
so your goal in having it removed from the designation is just to give you flexibility for the future, is that correct?
Yeah, and yes, basically.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. Just to let you know, I mean, I'm agnostic about that. I no pun intended. I just realized what I said. I'm interested in listening to the conversation here. And if there seems to be consensus on the committee to allow you to not designate the north wing, that might be something we bring here, and it might be something that we can bring to council after this meeting, just so we can allow this discussion to continue. I'll have some questions for staff after the delegations are done, but thank you. I appreciate this.
Thank you so much, Councillor Troster. Vice Chair Plante.
Hi, I'm actually going to use this opportunity to tell you, I think your church is really lovely and beautiful. And I did my heritage/mom duties last week during Take Your Kid to Work Day. And I went to the Lutheran church on King Edward and Wilbrod. And my son got to go up to the steeple. And I'm now the coolest person on the planet. So I just wanted to thank you and your fellow downtown priests and reverends. I know you guys are struggling a lot with construction issues, heritage issues, longevity issues. And I know you guys really do make a good effort to take care of your space, and it was very evident in your presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Member Quinn.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Is this the wing that is used as your parish hall? How are you currently using the space?
So there's a second floor, and currently there is a Christian college that is using it, renting that space. And then the main level is used for office space. We have a nursery area for children and a library. And then the basement is like more storage space.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your delegation. I don't see any other hands raised, so thank you, Reverend, for being here this morning. Our next registered speaker is Jack Hanna from the Centertown Community Association. Thank you so much for joining us, and you have 5 minutes. And you just need to hit the button at the base. Thank you.
Okay. I'm the chair of the Centertown Community Association's Heritage Committee. The Centertown Community Association is 100% in support of all 3 buildings in Centertown that are up for designation today. That's St. Peter's and St. Paul's, 66 Queen, the J.W. Woods Building, and 249 Bronson, McPhail Church. About a year ago, the city's Heritage Branch sent us a list of some 50 properties in Centertown that were candidates for heritage designation, and they asked us to identify priorities. We created a big survey. We sent this out to our membership. We tabulated the results. We held meetings, and we produced a top 10 list, which we provided to the Heritage Branch. All 3 of these buildings figure prominently on our top 10 list. They're beautiful. They enrich the heart of the nation's capital. That's all I'm going to say at the moment. I'll be back before you for 66 Queen, but I just wanted to state the Community Association's support.
Thank you so much for your delegation. Councillor Troster has questions for you.
Hi, Jack. Nice to see you. Do you have strong feelings about the North Wing and whether it should be designated, or does the Community Association?
Like you, I'm agnostic.
Right. I'm actually Jewish, but no. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. So, you know, I'll have some more questions for staff, but thank you.
And I don't see any other hands raised, so thank you so much for your delegation. Questions to staff? Councillor Troster.
Sure, thank you. I'm just wondering about this issue of the North Wing, I know your recommendation is to designate the whole thing. I'm just interested in hearing from you about benefits and drawbacks and the conversations that you had with the owner and how you would feel if we put a motion forward to exclude it from the designation at this point.
Sure. So through the chair, so when we evaluate these properties, we do evaluate them as a whole. So we look at the entirety of the property and the sort of attributes that are present across the entirety of the building. So we evaluated this building, and the north wing was included because it does reflect several of the attributes that are listed in the statement of cultural heritage value. So the red brick cladding, the lancet window openings, etc. So there are attributes and features of it that are reflective of the broader kind of Gothic architectural value and also the kind of progressive areas of development that are reflected through the different additions to the church over time. In terms of conversations, so we've reached out in advance of this, and we did have some conversations with members of the, I think, parish council. We did tour the building with them as well. And in terms of our discussion, my opinion on the matter is that including or maintaining an inclusion of the north wing does enable the applicant or the property owners to access funding in the future through the city's grant program should they have an interest in doing restoration work that would extend to that north wing. And the actual sort of way that the designation is written is fairly general across the entirety of the building. So I do think that there's an opportunity to address any potential concerns that they might have with limiting the flexibility on the property through our alteration process rather than excluding it specifically.
Thank you.
Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much. Sorry, could staff show me with a rendering the north wing and what what portions would be excluded and talk about how that motion might be worded.
On slide 2 of the presentation, there's an aerial image. Thank you.
So just in that area, so in the area circled is the church, in the red square is the church. So the kind of, I guess, top left of that square, that is the north addition. Then you can see on the fire insurance plans there as well, the sort of, I guess, again, top left. Yeah, the top of the L, exactly. So that's the area that the property owners are asking about in terms of exclusion.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Is there a way, sorry, is there a way to describe that in text? If there were to be a motion to exclude it, what would that, do you know roughly what that text would read?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we have already drafted a motion. The committee coordinator has it.
So I'm not saying I'm moving. Oh, you put it up online. Thank you. Okay, and that's pretty straightforward. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Member Legault.
Yeah, sorry, I would like you to clarify, you said when you went on your tour of the building, you felt as though including the north wing would allow them to still have access to funding, but the exclusion of the wing would also allow them to have access to funding, correct? Sorry, I'd just like to understand that better, that comment.
So through the chair, our Heritage Grant Program offers funding to properties that are designated under Part 4 and 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, provided that the work proposed is restoration of attributes identified within the Statement of Cultural Heritage Value. So if the north addition was excluded from the designation, it wouldn't qualify. Restoration work to that area of the building wouldn't qualify for funding through the grant program.
Of course, right, but they would still be able to qualify for the main portion of the building for restoration work.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Member Madigan.
Thank you, Chair. Given the type of building we have here with number of additions over time, like normal practice is to designate everything that's been added to the building, but at the same time, there's always this revisiting additions when we look at sort of needs. I've worked on a number of projects where oftentimes we peel back additions to the building. How often does that happen in these types of applications, comparable buildings, that we are sort of reconsidering additions and pulling things back and taking off additions as part of the designation? Maybe a too broad a question, but
I think I can provide you with a general answer. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say that we always very carefully consider additions that have been built over time when pursuing a designation. You will often see us with exclusions similar to the text that has been drafted if there was a desire for a motion here that would exclude more recent additions to the building. I would say this addition is quite early in the history of the building and sort of reflects the early expansion and growth of the church. And it's similar, if you remember, the St. Margaret's Anglican Church on Montreal Road was a similar one. It had a stone parish hall from early in its history. There also was a request to remove that from the designation, and it was not removed. I will say that down the road, if there were, hypothetically, if the congregation were to leave and there was an adaptive reuse proposal, the alterations to the building, whether it's removal of an addition or other parts of the building, could be contemplated through the application to alter process. So I can't tell you how common it is. The Reverend did mention a couple of examples of different buildings where, like 315 Chapel Street, former All Saints, where Bate Memorial Hall has been approved for removal. And there are other examples, but it really is a case by case basis based on the history of the building and its cultural heritage value and attributes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Member Legault.
Yeah, just a follow-up question to that other church, the other precedent where the wing was not excluded. Was it a similar context where, you know, that wing, because my impression of this wing is it's really sort of blocked in by the adjacent buildings. I would imagine, I'm not entirely sure, but I would imagine that 3 of the facades have a total lack of light coming in. Is that something that, you know, the blocking of these sight lines, is that something that's similar in the other context, or?
Through Mr. Chair, actually, no. The property at 315 Chapel, its Memorial Hall was excluded, but it's quite an old designation. So it's before my time at the city, and I don't actually know why it was excluded originally. It's a newer addition to the building than this one is, but it was visible from the street.
Okay, yeah. From my perspective, it seems like that's the. I think the Reverend made a very strong argument, really dissecting the heritage analysis, which I think is good, but also the visibility from the street. It does seem like it has a distinct, separate character from the main building. It's pretty closed off, that north wing, it seems to me.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any other questions? Of course, Councillor Troster.
I just wanted to say, I wanted to thank the Reverend for coming. You know what, I think I'd like to think about this a little bit longer. So I think maybe we could take this back after the meeting. And if there seems to be strong consensus to exclude the north wing, that's something that can go to council. I'm very torn on this one. 1906 is still old. It's still, you know, is a heritage building of its own. And I'm not sure, you know, given that if this thing is, if this building's ever up for redevelopment through the heritage process, if they wanted to, let's say, demolish the wing, that is something they could still come to committee to ask for. Could staff clarify, like, what would be the process there? So if we designate it and they decide they want to either alter it or they want to, you know, demolish it and build housing there, like, what would this designation mean that they would have to do that's new?
So through the chair, it would just require that the property owners go through the alteration process under the Ontario Heritage Act. So similar to a lot of the applications that we see at this committee, essentially it would require them to come and seek a permit issued by council for whatever alteration, demolition, new construction, et cetera, that's proposed. So it would involve a pre-consult process with staff, as well as sort of the notification out to adjacent owners, members of the public, et cetera, and then consideration at this committee and at council ultimately.
And what are the costs associated with that approximately? Do you have a sense?
I would have to pull up the exact cost. It would depend on the scale of the application as well. I think for high-rise new construction, it's approximately 8,000 or 9,000 roughly at the moment.
And how does that compare to the funding that a designation would unlock? What kind of funding would be available to the property owner if the entire property was designated as opposed to part of it?
So at minimum, this as a larger scale building would be able to access $25,000 of matching funding through the grant program. And then in addition to that, there is the new stream that was approved recently, which I believe gives them access to up to $75,000 every 2 years.
Every 2 years. So it's your assessment that the heritage designation would actually be of financial benefit to the landowner, even, or if the building owner, if they wanted to redevelop?
I'm not, aware of their financial situation specifically, but I do think it would offer them more flexibility in terms of the funding they have access to rather than being excluded.
Okay, I'm going to think about this one and not bring a motion forward at this point. And Reverend, if you wanted to contact my office, we can talk this through to see whether your opinion has changed after hearing some of this at committee. yeah, anyway, I appreciate everyone who came to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Troster, and we appreciate the work that's undertaken by ward councillors as well as city staff. I think that we try to have exhaustive, in a sense, conversations with property owners and applicants before there's movement on heritage permits or development applications. I think it leads to better solutions for everybody in the long run. So.
This doesn't rise to
No. So I'm pleased that we're having these continuing discussions. And I know that sometimes there's a perception that these discussions don't happen, that things are simply pushed through committee without dialogue or discussion, and that is not the case. There's a lot of hard work that's undertaken by many of my colleagues around the table that have heritage conservation districts and heritage properties. And so it's important that we get things right, and that requires dialogue with both property owners and residents. So I appreciate the continued conversation, and I appreciate as well that we do have the report still before us. So is the report carried? Carried. Thank you. So this report will be submitted to council on November 27th for consideration. Our next item is 5.6, designation of 66 Queen Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and we do have a presentation from staff.
My next presentation pertains to agenda item 5.6, Heritage Staff's recommendation to designate 66 Queen Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. 66 Queen Street, known as the J.W. Woods Building, is a 5-story stone-clad office and commercial building constructed in 1900. The property is located mid-block on the south side of Queen Street between Elgin and Metcalfe Street. The building was designed by James Mather, one of Ottawa's most prolific architects of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Mather produced designs in a number of different architectural styles, including in the Romanesque Revival style, which is exhibited in the J.W. Woods Building. The building is a rare remaining example of an early 20th century commercial building in Centertown, designed in the Romanesque Revival architectural style. It displays a high degree of craftsmanship for an early commercial building in Ottawa through its rusticated stone cladding, carved stonework, and the use of material detailing in the building's copper architrave, frieze, and cornice, and metal spandrel panels. Next slide, please. The J.W. Woods Building is directly associated with James W. Woods and the Woods Manufacturing Company. James W. Woods established the Woods Manufacturing Company in 1895, which became one of the most well-known outdoor outfitters in Canada. The company provided supplies for historic explorations and is credited with introducing the first down-filled parka and sleeping bag. The building at 66 Queen Street was constructed as the Woods Manufacturing Company's first warehouse, wholesale store, and main headquarters in Ottawa. Due to the rapid expansion of the business, the company only used this space from 1900 until 1903. The building is the last remnant of a significant Ottawa business. James W. Woods was a militia officer and a significant member of Ottawa's business and charitable communities. He was active in Ottawa's early real estate community and involved with several local organizations, including the Ottawa Board of Trade, Ashbury College, and the YMCA. Next slide, please. The J.W. Woods Building has contextual value as it is historically and functionally linked to its surroundings. The building's location was chosen due to its proximity to the former Canadian Atlantic Railway, which ran along the Rideau Canal. At the time of construction, the building at 66 Queen Street was surrounded by other early industries and businesses, including the Bell Telephone Building, the Grand Union Hotel, the Office of the Free Press, and the Ottawa Electric Building. Initially constructed as a warehouse and factory for the Woods Manufacturing Company, the building has been used as a government space and later residential and commercial space. The change in function of the building at 66 Queen reflects the area's change from an industrial center to its contemporary function as part of Ottawa's central business district. Staff have determined that the J.W. Woods Building meets 5 of 9 criteria for designation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We do have a number of registered speakers. The first registered speaker is Jack Hanna from the Centertown Community Association.
So 66 Queen is associated in its early years with one of the most astonishing stories in all of Ottawa's history, period. That sleeping bag is an antique. It is a Woods 3-star Arctic eider-down sleeping bag, and it's 70 to 100 years old. James Woods invented the winter sleeping bag as we know it, the down-filled bag. He was also a pioneer in the whole concept of a sleeping bag. Before sleeping bags, people simply stayed in the winter in blankets. This sleeping bag was renowned around the world. There was no winter sleeping bag that even came close to touching it. Don't take my word on it. How about Ernest Hemingway? Hemingway praises the Woods winter sleeping bag by name in his famous novel, For Whom the Bell Tolls. I'll give you the brief excerpt. This is from For Whom the Bell Tolls. He doesn't know about that robe, Robert Jordan thought. Good old Pig Eyes doesn't know that I paid the Woods boys $65 for that robe. I'd like to have $1 for every time I slept in that thing in the snow. James Woods, you heard the company was founded in 1895. That's correct. But Woods started his business in Ottawa in 1885. He started a side hustle. He incorporated in 1895. He started out providing pants and overalls to the men who worked in the bush, in the lumber camps, the shantymen of the Ottawa Valley lumber trade. And he started supplying the other gear. He was phenomenally, unbelievably successful. His company still is flourishing today, almost a century and a half later. You can buy all sorts of stuff with Woods labels on it, tents, parkas, sleeping bags, other stuff at Canadian Tire or Sports Check or other places. Woods was a whirling dervish of a businessman. He was everywhere in history. Ottawa history, Canada history, world history, he was there making sales. When the Klondike Gold Rush erupted in 1897, Woods rushed to San Francisco and Seattle, the ports of departure for gold seekers. He made the rounds of the merchants, booking orders for pack sacks, sleeping bags, and tents. During the Boer War, 1899-1902, Woods was the chief supplier of the British and Canadian armies for all things canvas, clothing, tents, horse blankets, and he couldn't make the stuff fast enough. Same in World War I. He supplied the Allied armies with all sorts of things, including he made the gas masks for the Canadian soldiers. Same in World War II. The guy loved adventure and exploration, and he also understood the PR value of a good expedition. So he supplied all of the major expeditions of the late 1800s, early 20th century. Roald Amundsen's first navigation Northwest Passage, 1903. The 6-man crew of his sloop, outfitted by Woods. The company designed a downfill parka for the first Canadian Arctic expedition, 1913-1915. The first expedition, the expedition for the first ascent of Mount Logan, 1925. The first ship to circumnavigate North America. The Roosevelt Field Expedition in the remote Himalayas, and later, the first Canadian expedition to summit Mount Everest, all supplied by Woods. Now, beyond all this, Woods is a big businessman in Ottawa. The pre-World War I apartment buildings are known as the Grand Dams. The grandest of the Grand Dams was the Roxborough, where Confederation Park now stands, Laurier and Elgin. Woods built that and owned it. Among the big names of Ottawa who stayed there, 3 prime ministers resided there while they were prime ministers. Mackenzie King, Arthur Meighen, Louis St. Laurent, Georges Vanier, Lady Byng, Supreme Court justices, cabinet ministers, opposition leaders, they all stayed there, and it was built by Woods. He kept building and building and building. His business expanded so fast, he was always building new buildings in Ottawa, in Gatineau, elsewhere in Canada, and even in the States. And it all started meeting the needs of laborers working in the lumber camps in the Ottawa Valley, the shantymen. Does the story get more Ottawa than that? Thanks very much.
Too fun.
Thank you so much for your very informative presentation. And you do have a question from Councillor Troster.
Thank you, Jack. That was the most fun history lesson I think that we've received at committee. I want to know, how did you get an original sleeping bag?
It's owned by a friend of mine. It came down his family, and his sons in their 20s still sleep in this thing in the winter.
Yeah, well, it's lined with wool and down. It's amazing. That thing is warm.
It's heavy. It's 16 pounds. It's got eider down. The design was patented by Woods. The canvas shell was patented by Woods. It's a waterproof canvas shell, and it's got a wool cotton liner, and it's a marvel.
Amazing. Thank
it'll-
you so much. It doesn't surprise me that you were a high school teacher because that was an amazing history lesson. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And you do have another question from Member Madigan.
Thank you. It's more of a comment. I was like, thank you again for your presentation, history lesson. Didn't realize the connection until I read the report. I mean, I've bought wood equipment over the years at Canadian Tire and never realized based in Ottawa. So thank you for that heritage lesson. But it connects to the report where sometimes the writing of the report sort of says wood is a company that's gone in the history, but no, it's still a current company still producing, or at least the name's still there. And one hope is it's the hard connection back to the company. So I really appreciate that. And this aspect of, preserving our heritage, well, there's lots of interconnections with this building. And downtown, I walk by that building quite often. And I've always wondered how has that building survived and what was it that made it significant? And I really appreciate the opportunity to review this application for designation. So thank you for the additional heritage lesson on it, which really emphasizes the importance of this building and why we should be designating it. Thank you.
And incidentally, J.W. Wood's name is etched in stone above the second story windows in big letters.
Thank you so much for your delegation. And I think it's important I share Member Madigan's sentiment here in terms of tying our cultural narrative with our built heritage. Yeah. So you've done that superbly. Thank you so much. Our next registered speaker is David Jeans.
How on earth can I follow Jack's show? However, I wanted to introduce myself. I think you know that I'm a member of Heritage Ottawa's Advocacy Committee and also have had a long association with Transport Action. But I'm supporting all the designations that you're looking at today. For 25 years, Transport Action had its office within a block of 66 Queen Street. And incidentally, for the last 20 years, we've been next door to McPhail Memorial Baptist Church. So I know those buildings. I've eaten in the Japanese restaurant at 66 Queen. I've been to an architect's office on the upper floor of 66 Queen. So I know that building very well. And just as an aside, I lived for 50 years in one of the lottery homes from Lansdowne Park, the one which preceded the one which you've recommended designation of today, the 1957 display home. But back to this building. My interest is because I've studied in great detail the life and work of architect James Mather. You only heard a little bit about him, but in his lifetime, he was called the doyen or dean of Ottawa architects. Very prolific. Unfortunately, many of his buildings are gone. The third Byward Market building, for example, which was replaced by the market building that's there today. But he did design First Baptist Church, which you know very well because it's just over at the corner of Laurier and Elgin. He designed a significant part of Lisgar Collegiate. And in addition to the Roxburgh Hotel, he collaborated on the design of the Roxburgh Hotel, which has already been talked about. But he designed for James Woods 2 very large office buildings that were also on what is now Confederation Park. And those buildings were the headquarters of the Canadian militia and other government departments before and during the First World War. James W. Woods himself was the colonel commanding the Governor General's Foot Guards for 7 years, including all of World War I, where they got a lot of battle honors. In fact, he was the colonel. He was the second longest serving colonel of that regiment, and he personally paid for the uniforms for the entire regiment. So he was very wealthy. You heard where he made his wealth, particularly from outfitting the British Army in the Boer War. So James W. Woods, a very significant person to Ottawa, but also to Hull, because his factory was across the river and he was one of the biggest employers in Hull. And in fact, his factory was featured in a talk given 2 weeks ago by the Historical Society of Ottawa. So very, very important, though not well remembered in Ottawa's history. In the case of James Mather, unfortunately, many of his buildings are totally gone. The three that were in Confederation Park, the original YMCA, which predated the YMCA that you've just designated, and many other buildings. So I'm fully in support of designating 66 Queen, both in memory of James W. Woods and James Mather. And I would just like to say that I'm providing some clarification information to staff regarding James W. Woods, because I studied his whole life in connection with his home, Kildare House on Chapel Street in Sandy Hill, which is in one of the Sandy Hill Heritage Conservation Districts, and which participated in Doors Open some years ago. So I studied James Woods a lot. He married the sisters of Gordon and Cameron Edwards, whose office building you designated the Orange Art Gallery just a couple of weeks ago. So lots of linkages here, and so basically that's it. And as far as James Mather's concerned, I not only studied his life and work, but I did a very extensive presentation about that, which I've given a number of times, including to the Anglican Archives and to other organizations. So thank you for listening to me, and I'm sorry I'm not as entertaining as Jack, but you've got a very important building. It's a little gem of a building, but it's well worth designating.
Thank you so much for your delegation. And if you don't feel it was as entertaining, it was as informative, I feel. You do have a question from Councillor Troster.
Just to clarify, did you say sister singular or plural? Did he marry both sisters?
No. Basically, you may have heard of the spy office, which was decoded. It was next to Laurier House, which during the war decoded Japanese and other. Well, that was the home of William Cameron Edwards' brother, John, and his kids were Cameron Edwards and Gordon Edwards, who were very well known in Ottawa and later became presidents of the Edwards Lumber Company. But their sister Ida married James W. Woods. So you had all those linkages, and they were all neighbors to Laurier House, which was also designed by James Mather, just to add one of his buildings that did survive. And in fact, Mackenzie King's diaries have quite a number of references to going to dinner at Wood's home just down the street, going to his funeral, and also entertaining him to dinner in Laurier House. So there's lots and lots of history that's interesting there.
Thank you. Again, this committee is the best. I get to learn all these incredibly cool history lessons. And it's really interesting to hear the connection with the Y building, which was also the most fascinating thing that has come to committee in recent.
Yeah, though the Mather building was an earlier one at the corner of Queen and Albert. It predated the Y building, which you've just designated.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
Anyway, however.
I hope you'll stay so I can take a photo with all of you with your sleeping bag stuff. It's very cool.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that the clarifications about James Wood that I'm going to be giving to staff, I think are going to be reflected in some minor revisions to the report before it goes to council. But we've been talking about that, but they don't affect anything that you've heard today.
That's great. One of the things I love about being a city councillor is I meet people who have all sorts of passions that make our city better. There's the people who fight for the trees. There's the people who fight for active transportation. And I have to say, you heritage buffs are some of the best. So thank you so much. I learned so much from you, and history was my favorite subject in university.
Yeah. Well, if I could just say one more thing, and then I'll be out of your hair. I'm also vice president of the Ottawa Welsh Society, an event organizer for them. So the Irish presentation resonated, and I'm a conference organizer for the British Isles Family History Society, which was mentioned earlier as one of the possible organizations that might book St. Bridget's Church. So lots and lots of interesting stuff today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your delegation. Are there any questions to staff on this item? Member Madigan.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a minor question with respect to the style associated with the building. It's called as Romanesque. Where does that interpretation of the style come from?
Through the chair, if you just bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to pull up reference to it just so I'm accurate in my response.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we'll just wait for that information to be pulled up. Just in the interim, I just wanted to concur, since we're on the final substantive item, with correspondence that we received from Heritage Ottawa, really congratulating staff for their excellent research in the production of these reports. I would concur with that. There's a tremendous amount of work that's undertaken by staff, and we're appreciative of the detail. And we're also appreciative of the work of the heritage community, the different organizations that also bring their expertise to the fore and share their expertise with staff to ensure the betterment of the reports that are put before council. So we're appreciative of both the work of staff on an ongoing basis, and of course, appreciative of the work that is undertaken by the heritage community, much of which, or I would say almost 100%, is volunteer, which also needs to be lauded and recognized. So thank you so much to all the organizations that show up on a regular basis to this committee. Your input is valued and treasured.
So through the chair, just back to Member Madigan's response. So our interpretation of the style largely just comes from the different attributes of the building. So primarily the rusticated cladding, the window openings, the presence of capitals and corbels, et cetera, throughout. The principal reference that we do note in the report is the Shannon Ricketts Guide to Canadian Architectural Styles. So that was the principal reference, and we did compare it to some precedents that are set out in that book as well. We felt that this was an accurate representation of the architectural style.
Right, it's all interpretation. My first reaction looking at the building, I wouldn't call it Romanesque. I might call it influenced by Chicago style, a style in transition. So if that's a more correct description, it sort of elevates sort of the importance of this building style-wise, of not just being another Romanesque building, but it's a sort of transition from Romanesque to incorporating elements of Chicago style. And we lost a lot of these Chicago style buildings in our inventory of buildings, notably the Daly building. So something maybe to consider if as a notation to the file, or if that could be amended. But I think it would be an important addition. Although this building doesn't need anything more to show its importance, but I think as part of the architectural history and sort of evolution of architecture through time, pointing this out as a transition style connected to Chicago style might be important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions. I don't see any other hands raised. So is this report carried? Carried. Thank you. So this report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council on November 27th for consideration. Our only outstanding items are in-camera items, and we have none. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none. Inquiries? I don't see any inquiries. Is there any other business? Seeing none. On adjournment, we're adjourned. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. Thank you so much, everybody.